In this video lesson, we'll discuss the rise of American labor unions in the United States. The sweat of the laborer lubricated the vast new industrial machine. Individual originality and creativity were being stifled, and less value was being placed on manual skills. The factory hand was employed by a corporation, depersonalized, bodiless, soulless, and often conscienceless. The directors knew the worker not, and in fairness to the stockholders, they were inclined to engage in a private philanthropy. New machines displaced employees. Though in the long run more jobs were created than destroyed, in the short run the manual worker was often hit hard. A glutted labor market severely handicapped wage earners. Employers could bring in unemployed workers from the four corners of the country and beyond to beat down high wage levels using the vast new railroad network in the United States. During the 1880s and 1890s, several 100,000 unskilled workers a year poured into the country from Europe, creating a labor market more valuable. Individual workers were powerless to battle single-handedly against giants of industry. They were forced to organize and to fight for their basic rights, and they found the odds stacked against them. The corporation could dispense with the individual worker much more easily than the worker could dispense with the corporation. They could pool cast wealth through stockholders, have lawyers, buy up the local press, and pressure politicians. They could import strike breakers, which were called scabs, and employ thugs to beat labor organizers. They could call upon the federal courts to issue injunctions ordering strikers to cease striking. If defiance and disorders ensued, the company could request the state and federal authorities to bring in troops, and rebellious workers were locked out by employers. They could compel them to sign ironclad oaths or yellow dog contracts, both of which were solemn agreements not to join a labor union. A corporation might even own a company town with its high-priced grocery stores and easy credit. Often the workers sank into perpetual debt, which resembled that of serfdom. The middle-class public, annoyed by recurrent strikes, grew deaf to the outcry of the worker. American wages were perhaps the highest in the world, yet somehow the strike seemed a foreign importation, socialistic and hence very unpatriotic. Labor unions were given a strong boost by the Civil War, which put more of a premium on labor, and the mounting cost of living provided an urgent incentive to unionization. By 1872, there were several 100,000 organized workers and 32 national unions, representing such crafts as bricklayers, typesetters, and shoemakers. The National Labor Union represented a giant boot stride by workers. The union lasted 6 years, attracting 600,000 members, including skilled and non-skilled farmers. But it kept with the times. It excluded the Chinese and only made nominal efforts to include women and African Americans. Black workers organized their colored National Labor Union, but their support for Republican Party and racism of whites prevented the union. The National Labor Union agitated for the arbitration of industrial disputes and the 8-hour workday, which was won by, and actually won the latter for government workers. But the devastating depression of the 1870s dealt a knockout blow, and labor was rocked on its heels during the years of the Depression. Wage reductions in 1877 touched off such disruptive strikes on the railroads that only troops could restore the peace. A new organization called the Knights of Labor seized the torch dropped by the defunct National Labor's Union. It began inauspiciously in 1869 as a secret society with a private ritual, passwords, and a special handshake. The Knights of Labor sought to include all workers into one big union. This is their symbol. A welcome mat was rolled out for the skilled and unskilled, for men and women, for whites and underprivileged African Americans, some 900,000 of whom joined the Knights. They barred only non-producers, such as liquor dealers, gamblers, lawyers, bankers, and stockbrokers. The embattled Knights refused to thrust their lance into politics. Instead, they campaigned for economic and social reform, including producers' cooperatives and codes for safety and health in the workplace. Fostering industrial arbitration, the Knights waged a determined campaign for an 8-hour workday. Under the leadership of Powderly, they won a number of strikes. When the Knights staged a successful strike against Jay Gould's Wabash Railroad in 1885, membership mushroomed to about 750,000 workers. The Knights were riding for a fall, though, and they became involved in a number of May Day strikes in 1886, about half of which failed. A focal point was Chicago, which was home to 80,000 people. Chicago was also home to a few hundred anarchists, many foreign-born, who were advocating a violent overthrow of the American government. Tensions built up the bloody Haymarket Square episode. Labor disorders had broken out, and on May 4, 1886, the Chicago police advanced on a meeting. Suddenly, a dynamite bomb was thrown that killed or injured several dozen people. Hysteria swept the Windy City. 8 anarchists were rounded up, 5 of whom were sentenced to death, 1 whom committed suicide, and the other 3 were given prison terms. In 1892, John Altgeld was elected governor of Illinois, and after studying the Haymarket case, he pardoned the 3 survivors and was criticized and lost in the re-election. The Haymarket Square bomb helped blow the props from under the Knights of Labor. They were associated in the public mind, though mistakenly, with the anarchists. The 8-hour movement suffered correspondingly, and strikes became very ineffective. Another fatal handicap of the Knights was their inclusion of both skilled and unskilled workers. Unskilled labor could easily be replaced by strike-breaking scabs. They finally wearied of sacrificing this advantage to the altar of solidarity with their unskilled co-workers and sought refuge in a federation of exclusively skilled craft unions, and the American Federation of Labor was born. By 1890s, the Holy Order of the Knights of Labor had melted away to 100,000 members, and these gradually fused with other protest groups of that decade. The elitist American Federation of Labor in 1886 was the brainchild of Samuel Gompers. A Jewish cigar maker, he rose spectacularly in the labor ranks and was elected president of the American Federation of Labor every year from 1886 to 1924. The American Federation of Labor was a federation. It consisted of an association of self-governing national unions, each of which kept its own independence. Gompers shunned politics for economic strategies and goals. He demanded a fairer share for labor, promoting what he called a pure and simple unionism. He sought better wages, better hours, and working conditions. A major goal of Gompers was a trade agreement, authorizing the closed shop, or all union labor. His chief weapons were the walkout and the boycott, which were prolonged strikes. The AFL established itself on the solid by narrow foundations. Composed of skilled craftsmen, the Federation was still basically non-political and punished foes at the polls instead. By 1900, it could boast a membership of 500,000. Labor disorders continued, only about 3% though. The public was beginning to concede the rights of workers to organize, to bargain collectively, and to strike. Congress will actually make a Labor Day a legal holiday in 1894. We'll discuss more about the impact of the labor unions and these strikes and the fight for better working conditions in our classroom lessons.